I'm Tami McCarthy.
And I'm Becky Fleischer.
We're two soul sisters on the front lines of growth and transformation, getting real about it all.
You know, sometimes we're totally in our woo-woo groove, walking on light.
Yep. And other times, we lose our footing and end up tripping over those very same rays of sunshine. That's woo-woo in the real world. On this show, we're giving you an inside look at all the healing practices and mindfulness that we use and how we integrate them into our lives.
Yep, we're talking to interesting people who can help us along the way as we look at some of the woo and wild things that make us go,
We hope that you'll join us, living woo-woo in the real world. Welcome back to Woo Woo in the Real World.
Yeah.
It's been such an exciting 2023 so far, I think, right? And
Yeah.
I don't want to waste any time jumping into this episode because we have been waiting and so excited to have our next guest on the show, Lauren Baptiste from Akello Wellness. Akella. Help me out. I practiced it and everything.
Right?
And
So
she said this would happen.
Akaloa.
And she said this would happen.
Akaloa.
So we're right on cue.
Akaloa.
Sounds
Akaloa.
good.
People. Akaloa. All right. Sophia may edit
I
that to
didn't
make it
make
smoother
it easy
us,
for
but
anybody.
It's all good.
You should start off by telling us what that is.
Well, welcome.
Yeah.
Thank
Lauren.
you. I'm so happy to be here. Okay, let me explain because I feel like once I explain, then it clicks.
Okay.
Achelois was a Greek goddess who focused on women and stress. And so that was my muse for my business, Akelo Wellness. That's a little teaser of what's to come.
I love it.
So
That's
then it'll stick.
awesome.
That is great. I've not heard of that Greek goddess. So
She's
I
a
like that.
minor Greek goddess, so
Okay.
not like a Aphrodite or some
Right.
of the other ones. But I
Right.
found her and I was like, oh, that's the muse.
That's
Nice.
amazing. I love that.
And Achelois sounded, yeah, I just flipped it to Acheloa
Yeah.
and that's it.
I love it.
That's fantastic.
That's awesome. Anything that we can do to kind of just like have a visualization that kind of just brings our own life and just centers our own self and how we can then go help others, I think is an amazing thing. And along those lines, why don't we just hit it right out of the gate? You are a burnout coach,
Yes.
and I have lots of questions for you. But the first question is, let's tell our listeners, A, what is a burnout coach and what led you to this work, part B?
Yes. A burnout coach is helping individuals. I specifically work with women, but I've also worked with men, deal with the effects of burnout. Right now, burnout, it's an occupational phenomenon. It's comprised of three things: exhaustion, cynicism, and that, the words that are coming to me, this upward mobility, feeling like ineffective in your work. So burnout came to be in 2019 and it's been building, which is bittersweet because now we know that there's a name for it when we're just feeling overwhelmed. And it's sad because it means that so many people are feeling burnt out.
Yeah.
To have a title actually ascribed to it.
Exactly.
Say, this
Totally,
is a phenomenon that is happening so much that it needs to have some definition around it.
Exactly. Where you could go to a doctor and be told you have bronchitis, you can be told you're burnt out.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful thing now that we can actually like make it a tangible.
Right. Like put a name on it.
Exactly.
And the definition. I liked how clear that definition was with the three parts because sometimes you could feel like I like the cynicism that jumped out at me.
Yeah,
Because I think
totally. 'Cause
sometimes
when
you
do you hear that?
Right.
I
Like when do you
know.
hear that as like a component of
Yeah.
this is what's going on? Like your cynicism is actually at play here in something. So
Absolutely.
that was very interesting.
Yeah. And why, your second question, I burnt out. I was in corporate. I was traveling across the country, working 60 plus hours week over week, every week, Monday morning, getting on a plane, getting home Friday night, having a moment to sleep, do my laundry, and go back to where I was. I burnt out. I ended up in a hospital. And in that experience, I learned so much about myself. And it was really it's my decided rock bottom, because had I kept going at that rate and just pushed that moment aside, I definitely wouldn't be here today. I know that for sure in all of the ways of how I serve others, but even being an employee. I would have completely lost it, maybe through heart failure or something else.
Right. So I want to pause right now just to point something out, which is so critical to what you're saying and the conversations that we've been having, because our last episode was all about choosing consciousness. And you know, in all of these discussions about that and, you know, why we embark on this journey of more consciousness, more awareness, bringing our body into balance, bringing our mind, body, spirit into balance, right? This overwhelm that you are describing as it relates to a person's career is also very transferable to the overwhelm that many women face in their careers, in their home life, and just overall in general coming out of the pandemic. It's certainly, you know, a lot of people that we've been talking to, everybody is somewhere on the overwhelm spectrum.
Absolutely.
Right? And what you also describe that I just want to kind of put an exclamation point on is we all have, or people that are forced to make a choice, right? Which is kind of what you described. We all have this moment where we have to make a shift, right? We talk about these spiritual shifts, these energetic shifts, and you literally, like, your body was breaking down and you were in a health crisis and you had to make a shift,
Yes.
right? And it could have been, I'm just gonna get myself healthy so I can get back to work.
Right.
But you didn't take that shift. You decided to take your experience in order to help and heal others. Can you kind of talk maybe about that decision that you made a little bit?
Yeah, for me that felt almost immediate. Within a month of that burnout, I knew that this wasn't sustainable. The career I was doing, the life I was living, and it wasn't giving me the purpose that
Right.
felt
Because
good.
you were very successful.
Incredibly successful.
From a financial standpoint, from a material standpoint, right?
All the things. Working my way up the corporate ladder, not realizing it was leaning against the wrong wall. That's like the way I think about
Ooh,
it.
I love that.
Because
That's a good
it's
one.
like you just keep going and you don't even realize you get to the top and you're like, this wasn't the vista I was told about.
Right.
And that's how it felt. So for me, as I went through this journey, I knew that there was more. I knew that there was a way that I could be of service. But as I planted that seed, it didn't actualize for years after. Because in that month after, I also went through a downward spiral of myself. Am I not good enough? Am I not smart enough? What is it that I should be? You know, and I had to go through that inner work and inner journey. And that took time because coaching wasn't widely accessible and available. And it felt like there was not a clear path. I didn't think in that moment that therapy was necessarily what I needed. And maybe in that moment it could have been. But for me, for whatever reason, I was like, no, I need to get to the root of like what happened, why my body experienced that. How can I heal from that? And how even that connection of body and mind is so critical, which prior to that moment, I had no idea.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah. And you just said so many things packed in there at once. I'm trying to remember all the little nuggets that I wanted to pull out because you, and of course now they're already fleeting away from me, but you were saying how it took time and how it didn't happen immediately. And I think that's such an important point to put on things.
Yes.
And you couldn't see the path. So those are two extremely common things I hear from women in particular who have that same feeling of, I feel successful, I should be happy, I feel like I've checked off all these boxes that I set for myself as goals and that maybe society sets and says this is what success looks like, and so I've checked all those off, but there's something else, and it's just, we call them whispers, there's just a little whisper of something that's starting to catch your attention. You can't see the whole thing, and it does take time. And you also hit on
I mean, we're also so good at being busy.
Oh yeah,
Right?
we love to be busy.
Love it.
Yeah, and
I'm so good at it.
we are, and kind of goes to the burnout thing. Like we like to stay so busy that you can't hear the whispers, and they don't start to really play with you until you get quiet.
Exactly.
But you had said that about taking time and doing the inner work, and I think that's the other thing that's so difficult because there has to be a period of disorder. I have found for myself, like you have a certain type of order and then you have this disorder that is super uncomfortable, and it takes a good while to get through before you get to the reorder. So it's interesting to me that your story has those same similar contours that we hear from so many people.
And just building on that, the question that pops to my mind is, I mean, you mentioned inner work and you mentioned the mind-body connection, right? So prior to this incident happening for you, where were you on more either aware or conscious or spiritual path, or what we like to call woo-woo, that woo-woo spectrum, right?
Yeah,
I love it.
the woo scale.
I earned my badge after the burnout, but I will say I was raised by a dad who did green juice, right? So we were like bringing in health aspects.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in New Jersey.
Okay.
Not too far from
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
Not far from here.
Okay.
And so he was very health conscious in more of the like physical health, what we eat and how it affects us, less the spiritual side.
That's still great.
Still great.
Head start. Yeah.
But yeah, I took it. And then for me, I was a collegiate athlete. I ran cross country and track in college. So for me, I knew like taking care of my body was so important, and the effects of how, you know, when you exercise, how it supports your brain health and things like that. But it was until afterward when I was looking at, for me, and it's funny because we all have a reason of like why we start this journey. For me, it was the burnout, but for me also, I had acne on my face and my back for a long time. I was way into my 20s and I'm like, this shouldn't happen anymore. Like, I'm not a teenager. And I started going down a deeper health journey of understanding the connection of when they say there's a map where you could look at like where on your face you're breaking out and where in the body that means you're unwell. So for me, when I went through figuring out my physical health, going down the psychology route, the positive psychology route, I was really inspired to find that connection of body and mind. And it's after I burnt out that I started to find women's cycles and the effect of our cycles on our health and our mind. And then it opened up a whole door into Ayurveda, which I'm sure you know, I'm not sure if the audience knows, but that then changed the trajectory of my career and my life.
Totally. So just give a one-liner, maybe two-liner description of Ayurveda for those in our audience that don't know what it is.
Or those sitting here who don't know exactly and can't really say that word. I asked him every time. I'm always like, it's Ayur, what is it?
Ayurveda.
Okay, Ayurveda,
Yes.
everyone. Okay.
Amazing.
For those who are learning along with me.
Yeah, the easiest way I explain it as it's at least 3,500-year-old science, dates back from an Indian lineage. So if you know of traditional Chinese medicine from China, this is it has a lot of parallels to that from an Indian lineage.
Yep.
So that's an easy way to kind of compare if you've heard of one or the
and
other.
the Vedas, you know, they're individual. It's kind of like the encyclopedia of life, right?
It means wisdom.
And it
in
means
Sanskrit.
wisdom. Yeah.
Oh, I like
Ayur
that.
means life, and wisdom means, Veda means wisdom. So it's the wisdom of life, or the science of longevity, if you want to put a fancier term on it.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you found that and you started to dive deeper into that and positive psychology and making all those connections with mind, body, spirit. And so today, when you think of woo, you know, on a woo scale, how do you see yourself in comparison to before the burnout?
Yeah, completely transformed in the sense that I have now awareness. There are things in my body that happen that I can be more sensitive to and actually feel when we're going a certain speed. You know, even if you think about it, you're driving on 684 and you're going, 100 miles per hour, you only see the major signs that tell you turn here or turn off here. You're not noticing the beautiful trees or the foliage or, but you could if you were going maybe 25 miles per hour on that. So for me, I've learned to slow my life. That doesn't mean slow my productivity, slow my output, slow my, fill in the blank. It just means I live in a more conscious state where I can be aware. So for me, woo is in me in the sense of I can feel it, I can connect to it, it helps me make decisions, and I know also when I'm out of it and then when I need to come back to it.
Right, because it's a process. There's sometimes where we're going to be slow and in balance, and there's sometimes, life is throwing stuff at you.
100%.
And but it's good that you can always come back to that, right? And one of the things that in following you and getting to know you a little better, that really struck me is this idea of, change isn't going to happen overnight, right? And doing things in these little small steps, that's where you're going to start to see results, or how we talk about it are the shifts, right? But you had something go viral as you were celebrating your burnout anniversary, right? And you didn't really expect that, did you? It really struck a chord. So for folks who are listening, tell us about that. You put a post out on your on your Instagram, right?
Yeah.
And then what happened?
My burn anniversary was 10 years ago on Valentine's Day. And still the transformation between then and now is like so vast. But as I put through that week, my plan was, okay, let's share my story. Let's share lessons learned. Let's talk about what went wrong and how we can do better collectively with one another. And on the second day, a few days later, I just noticed it started to like pop like popcorn, a few comments, a few posts, and then all of a sudden, at this point, there's been 1 million views.
Wow.
Which is
At this
amazing.
point, there's been over 600 comments. At this point, there's been like thousands of likes. I've lost track. I think we're at like 5,000 or 6,000 likes. And what I'm seeing in the stories is my experience wasn't a one-off.
Right. I mean, it's striking a chord. Everybody is experiencing this in some way, and it's a way to really connect with each other. Because I feel like so many women are alone. They think they're going through this alone.
Yep.
And if they jump off that hamster wheel, that's where all the programming comes in, right? And the conditioning.
Something bad's
about,
gonna happen.
Well, bad's gonna happen.
Everything's gonna fall apart.
Shame,
Yes.
guilt. There's a lot of things tied to identity, confidence,
exactly.
and it can crumble so fast
Yes.
because we so tightly weave who we are to what we do and what we accomplish, and it at some point it has a breaking point.
Yes.
And so it happens in those moments.
Right.
And that's how it happened to me. And
Right.
for so many people that had that universal experience too.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry,
I
know.
I was
so
going to
many
ask
questions.
I had so many questions for people who resonated. I mean, clearly that hit a point with people. So what would your first piece of advice for someone who saw that and they're just like, I'm there, like that's where I'm heading. I'm heading right to have my very own, burniversary. So how do I avoid this? What do I do? Like, what would be a first step that you would say to someone?
I love first that you mentioned that the idea of like, I'm here, what do I do? Because I will say a lot of the posts were F your boss, quit your job.
Right.
And that's what happens in that moment. Anger, right? Because we're coming up against friction of, I've poured my blood, sweat, and tears into a company for years, and this is what I get in return.
Right.
So the fact that you mentioned like, well, what do I do now that I'm here? Before you quit your job, before you think just leaving is going to change things, it's not.
Right.
And that's where that inner work starts. And if inner work doesn't feel as accessible, there are little things you can do. Take 15 minutes to yourself, meditate, journal, reflect, hang with a friend, call someone
Listen to
you
the
love.
Woo Woo podcast.
Listen to
Exactly.
the Woo Woo podcast. They're short and sweet.
We got tools and tips, people.
I do, you do. I
No,
love
I
them,
know.
by the way. It's so fun to
Joking.
listen
Shameless
to.
plug.
It's good, but they're great. I love it. But that's been like, that's a great starting point of just awareness of something has to change.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
it's easy to blame other people, but it's until I took responsibility for that situation
Right.
that I changed, I transformed through many little shifts over time.
Yeah, and I love that your last post of your Burniversary post, that's where you really broke down, here's where I was, here's what I was thinking, and here's now what I've learned about this. And one of them was, a lot of this was me.
Yeah.
It was a lot of my small little actions that compounded to get me to where I was. So I think it's important. We talked about this in another episode about like reactivity and kind of reacting to something usually doesn't land you where you want to be and can sometimes
Right.
make it worse.
Right.
So it's always helpful to know. Like,
I mean,
what are the
a lot
little
of times
things?
we're triggered by things that we actually know we have to change about ourselves. That's been a theme through a lot of stuff I've been seeing and coming over the transom, right? Because I am really deeply trying to get rid of the things that trigger me, And so in your work, I think these small steps, but also how you help women to reframe their lives is really, really important. And also, why don't women want to invest in themselves?
Why do we have to make that convincing argument?
Right, can we talk about that?
I mean,
It's a
why?
thing.
Why do we treat ourselves like such crap? Why do we do that?
Really?
It's a great question. I mean, you see it over and over, right? As the mama, like, we serve everyone else first. And whether we have kids or not, we all have that like nurturing, mothering, loving nature. And we want to help everyone else. And it's a mix of people pleasing. It's a mix of feeling like I can figure this out on our own. We have this like independence.
Yes.
But to a fault sometimes. And a mix of all of these different like beliefs as we grew up, of just like maybe even, you know, don't speak up, right? It's like I feel like breaking all of these barriers of what we're taught to believe of what's the way to be and the way that is beneficial.
Right.
So it's easy to say, well, I'm putting a new roof on my house and my kids are going to private school and, you know, my husband's the breadwinner. And sometimes that's the case, sometimes it's not, depending on who I'm working with. But there's value in you.
That's right.
Yes.
It shouldn't have to be compared as lesser than. In my opinion, I think it's more important than, right? If you ever heard like happy wife, happy life, right? Like you've heard all these types of things of when we invest in ourselves or put our oxygen masks on first, that's when we can help others and do it in a sustainable way versus let me just get a quick manicure and it feels good for an hour, but then back into the whole swing of it as I chip my nails and I get pissed and then I it's like a whole thing.
And I think we do a disservice to women by talking about self-care in this way. It's like, yes, have the bath, get the nails done, get your hair done, take care of yourself, groom yourself. Yes, yes, yes. But what we're really talking about here, and when you mention things like inner work, and we talk about this going inward, that's really the true self-care that is going to make or break a person's life, but particularly women, right? I mean, we just don't take the 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. I mean, sometimes, you know, the interesting thing is, and I want to bring this up in this context, while we're talking about this, is literally before I came here today, I was having a conversation with a woman. She is very wealthy. She can go anywhere she wants. She's a philanthropist. She, you know, she has resources in her life, right? And somehow we got on this conversation, which seems to be happening a lot. There's a vibration or a frequency that I'm in right now where I get on this topic of talking to women about taking a retreat, for example, or when we went on this retreat a couple of weeks ago, right? And so she said, you know, I've been thinking about going on a dark retreat. And I go, oh, a dark retreat. And a dark retreat is you literally sit in a dark room.
Oh.
That's part of the dark retreat.
Oh, it's like a sensory deprivation thing?
Yes.
Interesting.
But what was even more interesting in our conversation is the things that are on her list, right? Whether it's a bucket list or things that she wants to quote unquote do. She literally said to me, I don't need to go somewhere and, you know, see something or, you know, say I went to a certain place and I've crossed that off my bucket list. She said, what's on my bucket list is how I want to feel again.
Yes.
So good.
Amen to that.
And I was like, ooh, I have to remember that when I'm talking to Lauren and Becky, right? Because I wish, regardless of who any woman is, whether you have resources or you don't have resources, we all can take a minute or find a tool that is going to switch that on for us. How do I want to feel?
How do I want to feel?
Absolutely.
Right?
That's
How
so
do you
good.
bring that aspect into your work with women? Do you get them to start to think about how they're feeling about things?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of times when women come to me, it's saying like, work is always the, you know, what I do is my identity. I notice that I've given everything to it. I'm hitting a plateau. And then all of a sudden things in the other areas of life start to crumble. The relationship starts to have friction. I don't even want to be like full parent right now, and I'm frustrated. And then it has this boomerang effect where then it even comes back and hurts the career even further.
Yeah.
So that's how they're coming to me. So for us, it's about like taking all of that apart, unraveling it, putting it all out on the table and being like, okay, let's zoom out and look at this situation. And how you want to feel. Oftentimes when someone's burnt out, I don't know how I want to feel. I just don't want to feel like this.
Right.
Yeah.
So it can be hard in the beginning to say, well, tell me how you want to feel. Tell me what you want 6 months from now, a year from now. I just don't want this anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
But it takes time to then kind of like calm the nervous system down, get them inspired again, small actionable steps.
Yep.
You know, for me, it was even books. it's podcasts like this, just hearing, like you said, that high vibe frequency versus low vibe. You know, I stopped, you know, I probably haven't watched the news in like
Totally.
10 years.
Yes.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Truly,
Yeah.
because I know I get whatever I need to through the outlets that, you know, that I need
Right.
to.
Right. You
And
can stay informed and
that's right.
educated, but yeah.
And that's it.
Yep.
Yes.
And even in COVID, one of my biggest things to tell clients was, or any speaking event was, limit your news to no more than 20 minutes a
Yes.
day. Any social, if you really can, because it does infiltrate and make us not feel our best.
Totally. Yeah.
Well, it's like anything else we ingest, right? I mean, we don't want to put bad things we don't want to be eating bad things. We don't want to be putting bad things on our
100%.
skin.
Right into the
It's
eyes.
going right into our eyes and ears and right into our brain and right into our nervous system. So yeah, I'm with you there 100%.
So true.
One of the things that I read on I think it was one of your Instagram posts that I thought was really fascinating, and I think I can see this applying to a lot of women because it may or may not apply to me. I'm not gonna divulge totally, but
I have a friend.
yeah, I have a friend who will often have work that they love, that they absolutely love doing, and still hit that burnout spot.
Yeah.
And I think that can be confusing because,
So confusing.
right?
Yes.
So can you speak to that a little bit? Because I know that was one of your clients had mentioned that. And so I was
Absolutely. That can be one of the hardest things. Like, not everyone hates their job.
Right.
A lot of people actually love what they do, but because they're running so fast, they're doing it. You know, I use like the term "the end justifies the means," like that Napoleonic quote, and it's like, you know, it doesn't serve, and so we're running so fast that we start to burn out, even doing what we love. I've worked with business owners who are like, I'm so passionate about my work, and I forgot to eat lunch. Like, I don't eat lunch anymore.
Right.
Or I love what I do, but like now I'm getting these tension migraines. And we have to be mindful of that. Our businesses, especially when business owners are an extension of us. When we're in corporate, though, that still feels like it's who I am. So we need to be mindful that if I'm not taking care of myself or putting my well-being goals next to my revenue goals or professional goals, it will have a teeter-totter over time, or you're going to have to focus on your health because your illness has just taken so much of your capacity. So they have to be done in tandem, and we are starting to see some companies who are integrating that into their professional review system. When I'm going to give you a bonus, did you hit your wellness goals? Did you hit the goals of your team? Did you make sure that people, and we're still far away from making that spread, but some of the more forward companies, because they know in order to keep my people in the long term, I have to make sure that they're taking care of themselves.
And their productivity and their ingenuity and their
100%.
creativity. I mean, all of those things are the first things that go when you start to burn out. So it's funny you said that they brought up the wellness goal, because the minute you said that, like, you have to hold your wellness goal next to your
Revenue goal.
goal, right, or whatever your goal is.
A lot of thoughts come up.
Like, really a lot of thoughts just came up for me. I was like, ooh, that is an actually very interesting way of looking at it. Like, that's a helpful step for that person I was mentioning that might have a problem with this. So thank you.
But that can be helpful for you, and measure yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. How's your business doing? Okay, maybe it's a 10, but on a scale of 1 to 10, how's your wellness doing? It's a 2. Well, then maybe it's an opportunity. What would happen if we went down to a 9 and went to at least a 5 or 6 in wellness? And it's possible. That's the beauty of the work. And you'll notice the more you get a good taste of it. That's for my clients. Like, you come in because we're all busy, and how do I integrate this? It feels more additive. It's actually subtractive. It's like less becomes more. You feel good with space. You can then feel the woo. Right? This is where it all starts to like
and where it gets juicy and gooey, where I love it so much.
So,
And then that's really where you start to feel like you're tapping into your purpose. You know, you had said earlier about, you know, I was climbing this corporate ladder, but I felt like something inside, there was some purpose not being hit.
So true.
And it is in the space and in the quiet. That's where you start to find that stuff.
That's the magic.
That's the magic.
And I think like a big message is, or a takeaway that I hope people out there, you know, when they hear this conversation, you know, it's also not like having a job is bad, working in corporate America is bad. Like, there are benefits, and there are there's a need in our society, and there always will be, for that work. It is good, important work, right? But I think more and more people are becoming more aware and more conscious that it doesn't have to be an all-consuming identity for yourself. and that there is a path and that there is a way to embark on this journey, and whatever that means for you, right?
As you're sharing that, like one thing that I'm hearing loudly is like, and there's a responsibility for us to take care of ourselves.
Yes.
You know, there's this analogy. I was talking to the chief wellbeing officer at a Big Four accounting firm, and we were talking about the idea of a fish tank. There's a fish, and that's dying in dirty water. And do we just like give the fish medicine and hope that the fish survives, or do we just change the water? The reality is we need to do both. Because if the fish is dying just because it's in clean water, like it's now sick, it's dying.
Right.
So we need to heal the fish. We need to clean the water. So that's the corporate, cultural, like the way that we are. You know, I know there was even a poster like, can we make this the year of like lay down? You know, like the year of chill.
Yeah.
And we can. So that's us changing the water if we can all collectively decide.
I mean, I know a woman that she specializes in being a chillpreneur.
So good.
Right?
Chillpreneur.
A chillpreneur.
Subscribe.
And
Yeah.
And it's just like, you know, that's a mind bender, you know, that you can actually be chill about being an entrepreneur, because those two concepts are usually completely polar opposites, right?
Well, most of us who are taking like charge of our life often are type A. We have like perfectionistic tendencies.
Yeah.
They get us where they are, and they also get us where we go, you know? And so we have to be mindful of both of those. So to your point, if she's embracing, I've always said, like, my dream is to be a type B. And I'm like, I'm working towards it, but I'm still not there yet. Yeah. Still a ways to
funny.
go. But a chillpreneur, like, the air of that just feels really nice.
I know.
Because it allows you to still hold on to the entrepreneur, you know, help to hold on to that kind of wanting to be productive and get things done side of things, but not at the expense of everything else around you. So
yeah, there's a term, it's like, can you over deliver without overworking, and really sitting with that? That's a chillpreneur, right? Where you can over deliver in the quality, the way that you give, and not work nights and weekends and sacrifice yourself and your health and time with your family to hit that one moment, that one launch, that one event, that one deal.
Yes. Well, I have one last question for you, and then I know we probably have to wrap this up, and maybe there'll be a part 2 somewhere, or all sorts of things.
Looking at my sheet,
I
I'm
know.
like, wait a minute, I didn't get. I'm not type A at all, but
you know, the reality of our world now is so many people, particularly women, are remote workers, right? So they're working from home, they're managing the family from home, they're doing everything from home. How much of that, or are you seeing more and more clients because of that kind of dynamic? Women not really knowing when to turn the corporate work switch off and be in mommy mode. I mean, that seems like a really hard landscape to navigate for families, and particularly women.
It was like especially hard, which we can all expect in 2020, when it just, like a light switch, just we had to change.
Right.
I think there is a getting used to. I will also say, in pre-2020 times, we were still working 24/7. It just depended where your laptop was, or you were doing it on your couch. And that's where that is still happening, whether you're working remote, you're traveling. I don't see like the travel burnout as much, just because the travel isn't as significant.
Right.
But it's like, I'm just still feeling this way. Like, why hasn't this changed now? Like, now my kids are back in school, or now I am feeling this. Why am I still feeling that way? Well, because you're still working after dinner. You're waking up probably later than you wanted to, because you were up since like till 2 a.m. the night before, and then you're running
that whole fight or flight mode all the time, right?
Instead of waking up having like a slow, yummy morning where you get time to yourself. That's like my favorite time of the day. But instead, you're waking up at 7:30, 8 o'clock, showering, getting right to, you know, kids to school, or not, or just like turning on your laptop and kicking off your day. It's not good for your stress system, and it has that effect where burnout becomes apparent.
Wow.
So talking about the mind, body, spirit balance,
indeed.
and this is just yet another angle.
It is. And maybe a great way to wrap up today would be to ask, do you have a go-to woo practice for when you're feeling like, it's getting a little out of balance here, I'm feeling like I'm sliding towards that burnout zone again? Or...
Yes, it's so good. I have my symptoms in my body. I will start to twitch. I'll start to feel a lot of pressure in my back. So that's like okay, maybe I should slow down.
Mm-hmm.
For me, a walk is always, a walk is everything. Doesn't matter what the weather is, just getting fresh air, it changes the landscape, the environment. But I do have a nice meditation practice that I do in the morning. It's very grounding, so that's like a consistent thing. And when I'm really starting to feel off, I ask for help. That's the one thing I think I didn't do. It's the one thing I notice a lot of women don't do, because we feel like I can get through this. I'll take an hour and I'm back at it. And that's not always the case. We have personal burnout too. And it's important to be mindful of that when we're not feeling ourselves, to do something about it, to raise our hand, to get the help we need.
Yeah.
It's an amazing conversation.
It is. It's great. And I love the fact that you started that off by saying the indicators that your body tells you, because that, I think, is maybe the first step, is to be able to notice when it's going off. And that can be the first trick, right? And so, but great practices.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing those with us.
Yeah, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
So hopefully, I think some people have some things they can take out into the real world if they're feeling a little burnt out and overwhelmed. But if not, we're going to link to Lauren's website and her socials, and you should definitely give the girl a follow.
Thank you.
And it'll be a nice stress reliever in the midst of your day. But yeah, so till next time.
Thanks, Lauren.